Hello, everyone, and welcome to an extraordinary episode of the Variety Gaming Podcast. Today, we are talking about the visually appealing puzzle game Cocoon. Later, we're going to be interviewing a friend and minifigure painting extraordinaire, Fetta, joined, as always, my dust bunny bearded friend, Atrax. Tell us about the game.
This game is Cocoon, developed by Geometric Interactive and published by Annapurna Interactive. The description from Jep Carlson, the lead gameplay designer of Limbo and Inside. Cocoon takes you on an adventure across worlds within worlds. Master world-leaping mechanics to unravel a cosmic mystery. Released September 29th, 2023 for PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and Switch. And Ray, like you mentioned, we have a dear friend of the show, Mr. Minifigure Fetta himself, who brings us this wonderful game. Tell us about it and why you brought it to us. I mean, we know why, but tell the listeners why.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be on VGP here. I love what you've all done for the first season, and I'm very excited to be a guest on the show. But I tortured you with a game of my choice because I don't get that much time to play single-player games, and I thought that this was a perfect excuse, and then I would still get the same sort of social aspect out of it by asking you both how you felt about the game. So I had my own experience, but now I actually have this opportunity in a dedicated space to talk about like how you felt the whole time. One of the main things that really drew me into playing this game was the art style. It was kind of minimalistic-ish. If you see it or take a chance to go through any of the gameplay for this game, it's just simple. I think it's the right word to say it, but in a very distinct way. Like, it was purposeful to be simple. Like, you have some games that are a little bit simple and it's like a byproduct of the production team or something like that. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, and I don't want to bash anyone because I have no idea what it looks like to develop a game, but I really, really like the art style of this one. And I'm also a big fan of puzzle games, you know? Tests your brain in a little bit of a different way than some video games would. And I think that's why it's such a great thing to play a variety of games, if you know what I mean.
So, absolutely. We love a variety of games here.
Exactly. It scratches different itches. It tickles parts of your brain that you didn't know you needed until after you finish the game. So, big fan. And even in role-playing games on the tabletop, like Dungeons & Dragons, that's always my favorite part to cook up as the dungeon master or game master is little puzzles, because I feel like a lot of times players don't really expect it. They think I'm just going to roll dice and kind of smash goblins, but the puzzles can really challenge people in different ways. So, yeah, I think just recently games have been pulling me in based off their art style and how they feel more so than the content that they provide, if that makes any sense. You know, it's just, I don't have as much time to play video games as I once did. So I better enjoy what I'm looking at and what I'm dealing with the whole time. But, like, the mechanics of the game, I'm not particular. So some people will say that they really like to play Souls-like games, and that's a totally different style of playing a game. You have to really be crisp on your inputs and really focus in playing the dance and watching the characters. But, I mean, I'm not drawn to any particular mechanic style, and this one in Cocoon is so simplistic. It's, you have a directional movement and then an interact button. That is it. You could play this thing on, I have this little, what is it called? It's like a handheld game thing, but it only plays Super Mario. You could play this game on that. The controls, you don't need much. So I thought that was great. But not only are you solving these little puzzles throughout the world, you end up going and having these area bosses for each of the worlds. And each boss is very unique, where you don't actively engage in any sort of combat, but you have to creatively use the environment to take down the boss, which I thought was really great. And they got progressively harder and harder. using different patterns and different mechanics, and it was just a whole lot of fun. But the atmosphere of this game is huge. The sound is fantastic. It was just, it locked me in. I sat down, thought I was going to play it for 30 minutes, ended up playing it for 3 hours, and then did it again the next day. It was a ton of fun.
Would you say it wrapped you in its cocoon?
Oh, absolutely. And I transformed like a butterfly or a moth. I don't really know yet. It's kind of late. Maybe I'm a moth today.
That could be.
Maybe.
Drawn to the light.
Yeah. What'd you think, Atrax?
So, the first thing that when you said this is what we were going to play for the show, I was totally fine. It was a Game Pass game for those who are or do have Game Pass. I'm not sure. I should have checked if it was available on PlayStation Plus. I'm sure it is. But either way, it is on Game Pass. That's how we were all playing it. And I didn't do much research on the game before I played. I just, our thing for VGP here is the guest gets to pick the game. And so, we just play it and we give our honest thoughts on it. And so I just went into it all right, this is the game that we're going to play. Whatever it is, that's what it is. And I was immediately impressed with how the game flows. It doesn't tell you a whole lot. Like you said, it's a very simple game. It tells you these are your movement keys. This is your interact button. I rebound I played with a keyboard instead of a controller. I rebound the default keys from the arrow keys to WASD for movement. Spacebar was still my interact button. So I could literally just play one hand, the other hand, I don't know, just drinking a drink or whatever, just chilling. Playing, like you said, it's a very chill, relaxing game, and it just flows so well. You move over here, you grab the orb, and you place it over here. Oh, that unlocks something new. Okay, so then you walk over here. Oh, I can do this little move with my interact, and that takes me over here. And what does this do? Oh, that's cool. Oh, hey, there's that orb from earlier. What am I supposed to do? Oh, I drop it in here, and then I go stand on these little platforms, and it adjusts where the little orb is moving. And so then I have to stand on the right platforms in a certain order. It just flows so well, and it gives you enough information at a time to keep you wanting to play more. And like you said, the world design, the way that you go into one orb, and it's its own little puzzle world, and you get an orb in that puzzle world, and then you go out a cocoon layer, if you will, and you have this new orb, and you use this new orb to unlock different areas in the world that you're currently in. And then, you need to go back into this previous world orb because you gain some new friends along the way, and now you can do this and that. Just the way it flows is so well done. And like you mentioned, the boss fights, I really enjoyed how they were simple, yet you needed to be precise. You couldn't just, it was easy. At least I didn't think that they were super easy. It was easy to understand what to do, but especially the boss in the green world took me maybe 2 or 3 attempts before I didn't die, but it took me 2 or 3 attempts to get the little starfish thing hit at the very end because I kept getting hit by the purple orbs that it was shooting. It was really well done. And I like that type of challenge where it's not necessarily, like you mentioned, the Souls series where you're constantly dodging and focusing on this and that. And there is a time and place for that. I enjoy those games too. But this is a nice change of pace where there's still a little bit of challenge. It's not just a walk through the park, but it is very simple in understanding what to do. And so then when you do progress through these different worlds, it feels so calming. It's just calming to just go through and solve these puzzles and all of that. And I will say, green world, best world so far, probably will be the best world forever because green is the best color. But also I thought that the boss mechanic was really well done as well. Ray, you What was your experience with Cocoon?
So when when Fetta recommended this, and mind you, I've played a couple of games with Fetta and have kind of gotten an idea about his taste in games. So when he recommended this one, this kind of came out of left field for me. I wasn't expecting a puzzle game. That being said, now that I've played it, I've gone through it, I can see again how this would be a game that Feta would enjoy, even outside of like just picking for review purposes. Because I think we've hit it enough times that this game is calming. This is not your action, rapid response type of game. This is one that you need to use your brain. You got to think. How do these things interact? How can I solve these puzzles? And sure, if you want, you can go and look up a YouTube tutorial just to say you beat the game. But the purpose of this game is to think. It's to slow down. Because that's something that I did appreciate while I was going through it. There's no timers. There's no map. There's nothing. Even your death animation. At first, I didn't even realize I was dying. Like, it was just teleporting me back into the previous area. There's no menus, no upgrading, no going and exploring this, that, or the other. It wants you to enjoy the world. It wants you to see what these developers have created and built. So the fact that you can go at it at your own pace, if you want to go and look at what this path goes down, oh man, I can't get there yet. Well, at some point you're probably going to have to go back there further on in the game. And just the attention to detail with the world designs is something that I'm a sucker for. I've mentioned it several times on the show that I love the very small nuances and attention to detail that developers will put in. When you're running through the puddles in the very first world and you see those ripples, it was just the fact that they took the time to put the ripples. They took the time to put the sound effect of running through water in this game, the flying animation to where you're fluttering of the wings, the phasing in and out. Like, that's another thing too with the green world that you had mentioned, Atrax. I at least didn't experience any sort of issues or bugs with the phasing in and out of the boss mechanics or the phasing of the
platforms.
Of the platforms. Like, I wasn't being stuck with these little things. It's really different. We're talking about a game that came out in, about a year ago. Actually, yeah, September 23. So this game's a year old. And if we think about the games that came out from 23 to now, how many bugs and issues, it's very rare that there's a complete game that you can go and play. So those are the things that I really did appreciate about the game, at least to begin with. Oh, another thing, the sound, the different audio things. I know I mentioned the running through the puddles, but when you get to the green world, how the rain is falling. And if you notice, there is a difference between the rain falling when you're on platforms, and then if you listen to the rain falling in the water around you when you're running through the platforms. So, like I said, and I'm sure that there's a bunch of other worlds that we have yet to explore that they more than likely have put just that much effort into those other worlds. Another thing I really appreciated was there were simple puzzles that were really easy to understand. I think of like the first or second instance where you're rotating a little platform, and it's like, oh, okay, that was really easy. But then you get to the more complex ones. I think of the second world when you're in the green world, and you have to, right before you get to the boss fight, where you have a wall, you have a teleport, and a teleport on the other side. Like, there's a level of complexity to being able to, okay, I need to stop, think about how I can get this orb over there and what I need to do. And once you figure it out, it's like you get that little bit of reward, like, I got it, I figured it out. Now I'm going to start making a lot of progress in the game. And you do, like, once you figure that out. I also liked how they switched it. It's like if you had the orange orb and the green orb, you're able to do certain things, but then you had to go around, you had to flip it to where you needed the green orb beside the orange orb, and all of those types of things just made it to where I feel like the further on you go, the deeper and deeper it gets, where it's got to have a certain orb in a certain way, and I need to use this ability from this orb, and it's just like a complex but simplistic way of doing a puzzle game. I just really did appreciate how they built it and did it. The beauty of the game is something that I don't want people to just kind of run over like it's a game that you're running through. Take a look at the world building, the boss building, even your individual character and how that is built and designed. It's so, I mentioned, it's just visually appealing. It's something about it. It's just draws you in. You're like, man, this looks really good. Now, we're not talking about something like, Horizon Forbidden West or The Witcher where you're on max graphics. It's like, wow, that looks like a real grass or real tree. No, it's not that sort of visually appealing, but what I mean is it's just something about the calming atmosphere of the game that just draws you into the game, and just it's almost like you're being read a bedtime story as a kid. Like, I'll be honest, as I was playing this game, it brought me to, like, I feel like I'm reading a story to my daughter and putting her to bed. That's how this game made me feel. We mentioned it's a calming game. I highly recommend, if you can, put this thing on a Switch or a Steam Deck. Play this thing in bed. Like, it's just, you're going to just fall into sleep with this game. But that was my experience.
And, well, I want to add, you were talking a little bit about the map design, and it reminded me, too, that so far from what I've experienced, I believe that there's only one secret per map. So, like, you're kind of encouraged to explore and make sure that you don't just solve the puzzles as quickly as possible and run through it, but take time to enjoy the world, because I discovered 2 secrets, and I even got achievements for it, that I didn't see. And it even said, like, off the beaten path, I think, was one of the achievements. And most people get it, but even so, there are those secrets, but it's not like just packed with secrets and they're super complicated to find. They are relatively simple, but still it encourages you to explore the world more and really get invested into it. And I wanted to ask both of you, maybe Fetta first, have you played Limbo or Inside, which are previous games directed by Jep Carlson?
Limbo was one of those that kind of got away. So I wanted to play it. I heard it was critically acclaimed, and a lot of people wanted to play Limbo, and I never did. But this one was the more recent addition and kind of struck me a little bit first. When I originally got Game Pass, it was on there, and I've wanted to play it since I got the Xbox Game Pass for my computer, and this was just a perfect opportunity. So unfortunately, I haven't played either, but after experiencing Cocoon, I have to go back and play those.
And I'll add, I have not played those. Honestly, this type of game is something I probably would never pick up. I'm not one for a calming type of game or a traditional puzzle game. So the fact that this game has done such a very good job at pulling me into it and getting me into the genre, I will more than likely go back and revisit his earlier work to see if there are similarities, or if, just like us on the show, we grow as we do the show, if he grew as a developer in making these games.
So I asked this question because I did play Limbo on 360 when it came out, and in terms of the world flows, like it drops you in this one spot, and then you move over here, and this door shut, but because these boxes dropped in front of it, but then you can climb the boxes and you can go here, or you move the boxes, and just the way the world progresses is very similar. Same with Inside. I played Inside as well, but both Limbo and Inside have a very, very dark gritty world to it. This with Cocoon is very light. It's very calming. It's solving puzzles. It's defeating bosses. It feels very cheery. Whereas Inside and Limbo definitely were not that way. They had a much grittier and darker, and I mean, especially Limbo. Like some of the deaths in Limbo were really sketchy. Like they are. I go check out those games, especially with the Steam sale coming up. Throw them on your wish list. They offer a bundle for both of them. Highly recommend, because they are top tier games, and same with Cocoon.
I did want to ask one thing, and I didn't know exactly how far either of you got into the game, but are you at the green world, or have you gone past it?
I beat the green world and made it just a little bit farther.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm about the same thing. I beat the green world, and I'm getting into the next area.
So, full disclosure for the listeners, we had decided to play this game earlier this week prior to recording. I think 90% through this game.
Nice.
Which is kind of gross, but it's okay.
Nah, it's nice. That's what we love here at the Variety Gaming Podcast.
Addiction was quick. Every time I had a free 30 minutes, I would jump on, see how many puzzles I can get through, kind of thing. But one thing I wanted to speak to was how the puzzles continued to get more and more complex as you added additional orbs. And when we're talking about these orbs, they allow you to do certain powers after you've beaten the boss for that world section. But that's how you teleport between these different worlds or different realities. And the way that the game developers had integrated this warping kind of concept or mechanic gets even better the more orbs you throw into it. Yeah. Like right now I'm on the gray world, and it gets to a little bit more dark and gritty, a little bit like space ether. Like I think I'm about to fight Bug God, honestly. But I really like how they do it, and you have to jumble, like, where did you leave this orb, and how am I going to get it to jump across, and use this dimensional portal to kind of switch back and forth. It's really, really cool. It's really cool. I'm hooked.
And see, that's the type of complexity that we were talking about before, is just the fact that they can go that far into detail with something like this and continue to up the ante is fantastic. And especially if the world design is anything like the first two, then I have all ideas that it is going to be just as beautiful and just as appealing once we get to that point.
Yeah, I mean, the orbs give you different powers. Like, you notice that the orange one allowed you to view some of these hidden platforms, and the green one allowed you to alter reality a little bit. Then you go a little bit further, and they get a little bit more powerful. I don't want to spoil anything, but the way they interact with each other is just beautiful and very well executed. So I implore you both to continue to play this game, even though it might not be something that you originally thought you'd be into.
No, I definitely will. This and the episode we just did, We Were Here, are games that I really, really want to finish, because they're just, I feel like they deserve it. This game, for its own we've said it over and over about being calming, but the way that it's calming, and you mentioned the orbs like getting more powerful, which to me is just, it makes me more excited. And then with We Were Here being more of like a co-op experience that is just unique in of itself, it's cool to be able to then like look back on some of these games, because I know like with Cocoon, I feel like the replayability is very low, and same with We Were Here, the replayability is very low, but the first time through is just so great that it doesn't really matter. And that's something to me that's lost in a lot of the games that I play now, is that it's not really like they're not designed to just be played one time through and that's it. They're meant to be played. Oh, well, we need to think about replayability and how do we get people to play longer. And, the idea behind this game is really to just provide a really great atmosphere and a great story in the end. I'm not entirely sure still what's going on, but I know Limbo and Inside both had great story in the end. Like when all things are said and done, it's like, whoa, that storytelling was great. I imagine Cocoon is similar, but it's refreshing to play a game like this where it's just, you just one time through.
Yeah, you make a really great point. I can't think of the last time I've really played a game and had it be an experience, not worried about what I'm going to do next in the game, what the developers are going to add to it, how can they make it better, kind of. This one is like experiencing something.
And
yeah.
I think that's kind of the magic of these single-player titles. For me, I think about games that I've played in the past for the story and for the experience. Most recently, Horizon Forbidden West. Like, sure, there's DLCs and the things that are added to those games, but let's face it, they're not necessarily live service games. They're more of you go through it, you can upgrade and all that jazz. But playing something like this and playing single player titles brings me back to days before we had multiplayer. And video games were created as an interactive experience for people outside of watching movies, reading books. This was that next step to interactive entertainment. And you think about the games that you played when you were younger, or those single player games that you revisit today, when they come back, in classics, or they get remastered, or whatever it was that drew you to that game at the beginning. Now you're going back to it on a more of a modern day console or modern day computer just to relive those moments that you've already experienced before. Don't be afraid to jump into single player titles just to experience those stories, because case in point, like I said, this is not something that would have been on my radar, but thanks to Fetta recommending it, this is an experience that I would have missed out on. This is a story that I would have missed out on. That's really good and touches everything that you might want in a single player game. Like we mentioned the world atmosphere, we mentioned the attention to detail, the little bit of combat, the puzzle solving. It kind of touches all those points in a very good game.
It all wraps nicely into a cocoon.
Okay.
Of a great game.
Only one of us is a dad here, but the other one is throwing out the dad jokes.
You weren't doing it. So.
On that note, we are going to move into what I have been looking forward to, other than Cocoon, is peeling back the layers of our guest here, Fetta. See, I got one in there. We're going to talk with our friend Fetta and dive into more of who he is, what he likes to do outside of playing video games, and got a couple of questions for him. This is fully candid. He has not seen the questions, so it's all going to be impromptu. I'll start us off. Fetta, we know that you like to do mini figurine paintings. That's a hobby that I would like to say I got kind of recognition from Henry Cavill and his fascination with it is how I came to know that it existed. But what drew you towards mini painting?
To be honest with you, it's a little bit of a funny story. So for a little bit of background, I am a nurse. That is my profession. I have held many different roles in that, but the reason I mention it is because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and that kind of shut everybody into their own little worlds. And to kind of get rid of some of the stress from working in the hospital at the bedside during this time, I really fell into tabletop role-playing games. So Dungeons and Dragons, I really rekindled my love for that. And I think that I started to paint the minifigures because I wanted to have the most immersive, amazing return to the tabletop after the pandemic. So I spent a lot of time really honing those skills, painting a lot of stuff, using household objects to make buildings for my players to kind of jump in and out of, And it eventually blossomed into one of my favorite things that I actually do, not only for stress relief, but that creative outlet. And then I get to play with these things too. So I'm not just painting it to look at it. They are functional game pieces for very complex games with amazing communities, and opened a lot of doors and made a lot of connections for me.
And that's also why we here at the VGP appreciate it, because, you know, it's a variety of gamings, and minifigures is a very, like, unique section of gaming. You know, it takes a lot of skill and a lot of talent to make it happen. Do you remember the first minifigure you did? Minifigure painting?
Yeah. I totally remember. It was for Dungeons and Dragons. It was a small dwarf, and it is now in the garbage because of how bad it came out. I'm not gonna lie. It's been a massive amount of growth that had to take place for me to actually want to throw this one away. But when I moved, I was going through all my minifigures, and I was like, not culling the field, but essentially doing that. And unfortunately, that one got tossed. But it was actually a metal figure, and those don't really hold up well. So it didn't look like what it did when I painted it, but it didn't look any better.
Poor
That's
dwarf.
awesome. Poor dwarf, man. But
It's all good. He turned into somebody's fishing weight, I'm sure.
You threw me in the trash.
But it's good that you remember the first one, and in fact, that's actually rolls right into my next question. If somebody were to get into minifigure painting like you did, where would you recommend that they start?
Well, that's a great question. There's two places I think you could start. First, just find a figure that you really love and you want to bring to life. That's the first thing you can start. If you want to develop your own like artistic skills and actually get into painting it to look amazing, you got to go on YouTube. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of content creators that are really bringing this hobby back, like out of the basement, I like to say, because this is one of the things that's like uber dork. This is, you know, I have tape between the lenses of my glasses and I don't go outside. But it's really becoming a lot more mainstream, like you said, with Henry Cavill talking about his Warhammer figures, you know. So YouTube, find somebody that you jive with, somebody that you can listen to, and somebody that does a good product and matches the style that you like. Chances are they're going to have an intro to paint video.
I also want to quickly throw out there, I have not specifically used this section of this game a ton, but the game Moonbreaker, it's a minifigure game, and it has a really, really cool minifigure painting, like, I don't know, it's almost like create a character, but with minifigure painting. And the minifigure painting tool set that they have in the game is actually really good. A lot of people have said, like, I do the minifigure painting more than I play the actual game. So some people like to do just that. Check out Moonbreaker. It's not a super, super popular game, but it is a lot of fun. It came out earlier this year, back in February. Again, with the Steam sale coming up, the winter sale, throw it on your list if you're a minifigure fan, or even if you're not. Yeah, go ahead. I was gonna just say, like, even if you're not.
That's all I was gonna say.
Yeah, it's a fun game. I'm not a super minifigure painter, but it's a turn-based tac skirmish game. So yeah, Moonbreaker. That's a fun minifigure. That's a way to get into minifigure painting. Speaking more minifigure wise, do you have any like goals in terms of, I want to complete this type of set, I want to do this minifigure painting wise? Because you mentioned earlier, right, that your intro to that, when you really started getting into painting and all that stuff, was COVID, so that you would have the best return to tabletop gaming. Well, now that's probably over, so what's next?
Yeah, unfortunately it is over, and now we're back to online because everybody in my groups have made their way across the country.
Oh,
So it worked. But even though that was the start, I kind of dove into some of the more miniature war games, which would be like your Warhammers or your BattleTech for the old school ones. But I really, really like what are miniature skirmish games like that Moonbreaker video game adaptation, where you don't need a lot of models to play the game, maybe less than 10 kind of thing. And it allows you to actually spend a lot of time in painting them. But for goals, because I'm answering this question like a politician, I want to work on my technical skills as an artist because I've started to make that transition like, oh, I do this for fun, I do this for stress relief. And then I really want to challenge myself a little bit more to make it like an artistic piece. So work on two things in particular, like a glazing technique to get color blends really good. And then the other one is something I've been trying to teach myself, but that's color theory. So I can pick the actual colors that go on the model and make it look cohesive and blend, and like show emphasis in those sorts of things. So that would be my goal, is to just get better as an artist and think of it that way.
that's a great goal to have.
Now, we've been talking about painting minifigures and what direction people can go into, where they can find the information. But there's one thing that I've always, at least now with the surge in minifigure interest, have always wondered, where can folks look to buy minifigures? Obviously, we have it online. We can go to Amazon and things like that. But if you're not interested in doing Amazon, where would folks go to look?
Yeah, one of the things, your local game shop. Find it. There's going to be a community of great people that are willing to teach you not only how to paint, but how to play the game, talk about the game, and really develop that sense of community. So I'm very fortunate up where I live, and I have 3 really great stores within an hour of where I, live. And yeah, it makes it kind of a day trip when I go out there, but it's well worth the time. Additionally, with the increase in access to 3D printing, the amount of creators online has skyrocketed. So, I'm not saying go out and buy yourself a 3D printer, that's how you're going to get it, but there are creators that make the files, you see the actual model of the miniature that you want, and then you can pay like people like myself to print it, clean it up, ship it to you, and then you turn it into art. Patreon's a good one to find it.
Probably Etsy and Fiverr too, maybe.
All of those.
So we've talked broadly, like minifigures and painting just in general. What's your favorite minifigure game or series currently?
Moonstone. I love this game so much. It is a small game company based out of England, so over across the pond. They just finished up their most recent Kickstarter to introduce a new faction to the game. But the whole premise of it is it's like a fantasy style game, a little bit more fairy tale sort of style to the art and the lore behind it. But you are essentially taking 6 troopers as part of your squad, and you go onto the game board, and these magical moonstones have grown out of the ground, and they hold immense power. And you are essentially fighting to the death using spells, melee combat, to dig up these stones and take them back so that you can gain that power or wealth if you want to decide to sell them to the Goblin King. Amazing game. The models are just gorgeous, and instead of just rolling dice like you do for most of the miniature games, this involves a deck of cards where melee combat is done on this rock, paper, scissors mechanic. So maybe I would take my hand of cards, look at it blindly, and select, I'm going to do a sweeping cut. So I imagine this, you're taking your sword and you're sweeping across. But the other player has their hand of cards, and they choose a low guard. So they're trying to duck it. And you flip it over just like you're playing a game of war. with a regular standard 52 deck of cards, and then you see how much damage you did based on which moves you picked and what you thought the other person did. And then if you were to cast a spell or shoot a ranged weapon like a bow or a crossbow, you do the same thing with a deck of cards, and there are 3 colors and 3 numbers on each of the cards. And in order for the spell to be successful, you need to get that card. So say I had a pink 2. That's what I needed to get. I would put it down and I would tell my opponent that I had a pink 2. And they have an option to either accept the card that I've presented or call my bluff. So it's kind of like a mini game of BS in between it. And that's like how the combat plays out. I think it's really interactive. It keeps you on your toes. And it's just like a fun, lighthearted, silly game.
I have seen it and looked at it a little bit too. It looks like a lot of fun. I don't know if I have a whole lot of people around here that I would be able to play with, but even so, it is. I I like some of the characters. Some of the character designs are really cool, and especially for being a minifigure game, having cards not necessarily going the traditional dice route is, I think, super cool and unique too. Rayu, do you have any thoughts on Moonstone?
I don't. I mean, this is a whole new world for me with the minifigure paintings. I've always seen minifigures in games and have been like, wow, what type of game uses these, and never really had a group of individuals fully interested in doing tabletops. So never explored this side of the world.
It's a whole new world for Rayu. Well, okay. So you mentioned that Moonstone is more or less a card game. Now I'm going to flip the script a little bit here and ask, because I know you also, in addition to those tabletop games, also like card games. So, in your incredibly professional opinion, what makes a good card game?
Versatility and balance. You're always going to find the people that have a ton of time and these really analytic minds and can find amazing synergies to build these decks in Magic the Gathering or whatever card game mechanism you have. But in order to make a good card game, you have to have balance. And that's something that's very hard to find.
Okay. It's tough to have a balanced card game. Understandable.
Yeah.
Have you played Dominion?
No.
Oh, that's probably one of my favorite card games. You'll have to check that one out.
Okay. Yeah,
and
I definitely will.
And you too, listeners, Dominion. It's kind of an old one. I think it's like 10 years or old or something like that. I played it back in high school, but that game was a lot of fun.
See, card games, that's something that I can sort of chime in a little bit more on, because if you went to any sort of public school, at least if you went to a public school in America, there was a time where not only Pokemon cards, but Yu-Gi-Oh cards were such a big thing. And for all those listeners out there who know Bakugan, there was a time that game with the little mini magnets and the characters and the cards, that took over. That was in every elementary, middle, and high school from the north to the south. But no, I think it's interesting with card games, because I think for me, the only card games that I've actually like fully invested in are the One Piece card game to start with. Which the only reason I got into that is because some friends were like, hey, we all like watching One Piece. There's a card game. This is how you play it. And that kind of got me interested in it. But the one that really got me interested is going to be Unstable Unicorns. If nobody knows what that is.
I do. That's a great game.
Unstable Unicorns. I would exploit the mess out of the Phoenix Unicorn, and I would try to figure out ways to get... what was it? There was an action card where you could, like, draw the deck, so I would build a deck to where I would just sit here and draw through the entire deck and pick whatever cards I wanted. I was banned from playing that game. But, it's really cool. I don't know if you've ever seen the unicorn with on a T-shirt that says "I'll kill you." That is the unicorn from Unstable Unicorns. Uh, Highly recommended. Fun little card game if you got younger kids. It's a great way to introduce them into it. I enjoyed it. Um, but Ajax, anything else?
Yeah, all right. I've got one last one. Classic. Keep one, get rid of the other. Minifigure games or tabletop games and card games. Which one you keeping? Which one you getting rid of?
Oh, I'm keeping the minis.
Keeping the minis.
Cardboard can go home.
That was quick and easy and decisive.
The amount of time I've invested in painting my little toys versus
That's fair.
buying packs of cards, I'm not ditching
Plus, they're like way cooler to display than just a bunch of cards. I'm with you. Fair enough.
I'm going to take it one step further. I got a similar question. Binge, marry, kill. We're going to do your binging. Binging as in you're going to just sit for an extended period of time, play that game, and that's the end of it. Marry means you're committed, like fully that's your go-to, and then kill is you're just never going to play it again. Tabletop games, card games, or video games.
I'm
Can I
pausing
guess?
for dramatic effect. Yeah, go
Can
for
I
it.
guess?
Yeah.
To make it even more dramatic and suspenseful. My guess is it'll be binge video games, kill card games, marry tabletops.
Yeah, absolutely. Right on the money. Perfect.
Hey!
I don't think there's any other way I can split it. I'm already married to the minis. You figure I paint for hours, play the games. They take a long time. It's an investment. You know?
You know what's funny? I think I would also I would be pretty similar, although I would binge tabletops, marry video games, and then kill card games. Because there are some card games that are fun, but video games and tabletops are just where it's at.
Say I'd be different. I'd kill off tabletops. I'd binge card games, but marry video games. So
Fair enough.
More variety from the Variety Gaming Podcast. As you can see, 3 different answers. But thank you, Fetta, so much for coming on the show, taking the time to talk with us, and the wonderful recommendation of Cocoon, as we mentioned before, getting us out of our comfort zone, playing something a little bit different. So we thank you for that. I also want to thank the listeners for hanging out with us as we covered the game Cocoon. Maybe this is something that you'll be able to pick up for yourself, as we've recommended a nice relaxing game to end the day. Also, thank you for listening to the interview process that we had with Mr. Fetta to get to know him a little bit more outside of his gaming recommendations. It has been a blast. We do have a question for you. What is your favorite style of potato? It's a little random. Got fried, smashed or mashed, gratin, hashed or baked. What's your favorite potato? Let us know. Find us on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple. Rate the show. And tweet at us on X at Variety Games Pod. We'll see you in the next one.